So good morning, everyone. My name is Joyce Dixon-Lawson. I am a historian genealogist. And genealogy is what I love to do the most because there's always something interesting to find, always some new relatives I have not found. Then sometimes you find relatives you wonder, where did they come from? That's the thing about genealogy. It's personal. You're going to find things you never thought about. You're going to disprove some things that you knew from family records that this was true. Then you find out that no, it's not really that true. But it's all genealogy, it's all history. So let's have fun with it. So this is we're in the William Winter Building, and named after former Governor William F. Winter. So we're tracing African American ancestors using state and county records. And there will be some other records, but primarily state and county records. And notice I didn't say federal census records, because we've already covered state federal census records. And those are the easiest ones to access anyway. So let's get to some that you actually have to come to the archive and go on the website and look for it. I always like to have some pictures to identify now who my relatives are. So when you have those pictures at home, try to identify them. Put them in the acid-free folder, not the old album that we used to use. They have the glue stuff on the back because it's acidic, and then we get your pictures up. Okay, and try not to use the ink pen on the back because the ink will spread throughout the picture, and after years you have a big blob on your picture. Okay, I didn't know all this stuff beginning along. We learn as we go. So here, I guess this is. Let's see if I got the right thing on here. These are the ancestors on my children on their father's side. This is my children. What you saw at the bottom. This is my children's grandmother, Mayville Walker Dixon. And up here is Dosha Deb Walker. And these days are so stylish, y'all. And this is Quita Deb here. She's the mother of Dosha. And Dosha is the mother of Mayville. And I have a daughter, her name is Quita too. So she's like, where did you get that name from? Maybe not name this because that is not a made up name. That is your great grandmother's name. So where did we start? You always say started home. And I always say this is exactly where you started. Because you have so many records at home that you have not thought about using. You have the birth records, death records, what the hell? Cemetery records, obituaries, marriage records, family stories. Those family stories need to be recorded and printed out. Because sometimes we put something on a recording, and a lot of times, over the years, they get distorted. School records, deed records. And what are deed records? Why are we talking about property? Two reasons we're talking about property. In a deed record, we think as deed doing land or a house, something, right? But if we talk about ancestors, prior to the ending of the Civil War, our ancestors were property. And a lot of times you can find your property in the deed records. Make sense? Yes. Wills and probates and other court records. Because when we pass away, we want our property to go to where we want it to go to, right? So if I'm your property, then more than likely you may mention me in your will or your probate or the inventory record that says I want Joyce to go to my son Joe. It's all property. We're talking about ancestors, so we're talking about property, right? Any record that shows property, because I made this song, okay? And the need to know your history and the ability to accept the fact as it is. Sometimes we get very emotional about genealogy. It's history. That's just a fact. We can't change it. No. It is what it is, right? Put those ancestors on that tree, on that lineage chart, and move on to the next one. Because you done what you're supposed to, you found them, right? So I was at genealogy person. This is my great aunt Flora. And you all can't tell right there that I look a lot like her. Those genetics talk something. I didn't realize it. I was like maybe 50 years old and I was looking at that picture like, ooh, she looks like me. My mom said, no, you look like her. I always corrected me. That's how she's a mom. So African Americans are not listed on the Mississippi State Census records until 1866. That's because we're talking about after the war, right? Prior to that date, we're talking about property. To be on a census report or a census return, you have to be a free poll. So unless you are a free person of color or a free mulatto, then you're not listed on the state census record prior to 1866. And I use 1866 because that's the earliest one that Mississippi has that lists African Americans. So when your county born? What I was talking about earlier. If you're looking for a certain record, and you have to know what county you're in and when your county was formed, and what happened in the county. So you need to know a little county history, because genealogy is a history lesson. Okay, so for instance, if you say my family was born in 1890 and they lived in Humphreys County, and you go to 1890 records and you can't find Humphreys County. Now why is that? Because Humphreys County wasn't formed after 1900. So you need to look at the parent county. And what's a parent county? Yes, then we know surrounding counties. So you got to go, then make a circle. And if you can't find it, you make the circle bigger and bigger until you find it. Then you look at your migration patterns, because maybe they were looking for work and they moved to another county. If they were sharecroppers, then they went to wherever they could find work at. And sometimes in the same year they were moved because the history of sharecropping, sometimes people were moved in the middle of the night because they were trying to break that contract. Because sharecropping is a contract. And so sometimes they didn't like what was going on, and they would move when no one would notice them moving. So it's important to know when your county was formed. So this is what I was talking about when I was talking about I'm from Calhoun County. I'm from the big city of Baltimore. And the courthouse burned. And so I was like, where am I going to find these records at the courthouse burned down? But and I think I was like maybe 30, and I was driving from Houston to Baltimore one day. And so here's Baltimore, here's where I'm from. And then up here is Pittsburgh, which is the county seat for Calhoun County. Right? That's a pretty good way. And the roads are terrible. They still are. Don't tell me I said that, but they are. But here's Baltimore. I'm probably over here the Chickasaw County years ago down in Houston. Is that not a straight shot? And the highway is very nice. So why would I go take this whole route here from Baltimore all through here, go to Pittsburgh, when I could have gone made a straight shot from Baltimore to Houston? So I asked my sister one day, because I left Baltimore when I was like 12, and we were in Houston. I said, how do I get back to Baltimore? She said, you get on the highway and hold the roads. I said, what? So I was driving back and I saw the Houston courthouse. I'm like, I've been sitting all this time telling other people what to do. I'm not following my own advice. So I went to the Chickasaw County Courthouse in Houston, and there were so many of my relatives, and some of them are related to each other. It's all genealogy. So this part of our county history has state census records from 1818 to 1880. And again, it all depends on when your county was formed. So you come here to the archives, you go to the desk, or you can look at some of these online, because these are online now. Just go to the catalog and type in series 100. You can see it's 100. And it come up state census records. And the state census record, once you get to that point, you just choose your county. And again, every county not going to have one. So if you don't find your county, find the closest county to yours. I don't know why everything's over early today. So this is the 1880 census for Calhoun County, my home county. The 1880 the state census record has a great caveat because not only is it taking the same year as the federal 1880 census, but it also has an 1880 eligible children school record hooked onto it. I love 1880. There are so many different aspects of finding records in 1880. 1880 is also the census record used when Social Security first started being formed, and they were trying to find out who all would have to pay Social Security to. So they looked at the children on the 1880 census, 10 and under, and so at this time, at that time period, they'll be the ones, the first one drawing Social Security. See, you wonder where they got those names from? From the 1880 census.
And 1880 is the last year of the state census?
Of the state census,
Okay.
yes. I know you can't see that right there. Okay, I don't know why. However, it's just a list of the counties that have the 1880 census. And I said, just go on the archive website, and you will, they will come up for you. Okay. School records. This is the school in Vardaman, Mississippi, that my mom went to. She was so late when she saw this picture. I said, Mom, what's this picture? She said, oh, that's the school I went to. Where you got it from? Archives has a great collection of school records here. School pictures. So if you're trying to find a picture of certain schools, these pictures right here, they're on their website. So you go to schools on the digital archives, then you click on your county. Then you will see there's like 3 different sections of them. And you go to your county, then you start going through the school pictures to see if you can find the school that you're looking for. Some elementary children's school records, and we just talked about those. You can find them up to different counties, almost up to 1960, depending on your county. Now, I've seen the one from 1960 for Calhoun County. I found my father and my mother and my baby sister on the 1960 elementary children's school records. However, they were not supposed to be there because none of them qualified being an eligible child. Because my parents are married and my sister's one. However, the person who was assigned to go to Calhoun County and do the census, do the elder children records, do the indexing, they didn't understand the assignment. So lucky us, we come along and it's our advantage that they didn't know what they're supposed to be doing. Right? So what is eligible? So someone asked me, they said, well, my parents didn't go to school. I know my father, I only went to the 2nd grade. What, they're not going to elder children's school records. They are because, what's the prime word here? Eligible. And Western says, that can be educated or trained. So you didn't necessarily have to go to school to be on the elder children's school records. It's that you are of age to go to be educated. So the Secretary of State, when they giving out money for the schools, they want to know how many children in your district, not necessarily did they go to school, but how many children in your district were of age to go to school, right? So you want to try to get as many people as possible, right? Because you want the funding to come to your county. That's the reason for everything. And like us, we benefit from that. So family stories, your older relatives are your genealogy ambassadors. So many times I hear I should have asked my aunt or my grandmother or someone about this record. But they were telling me all the time and I didn't listen. I was like, we're so tired of hearing that same story. Now I would say, you need that record. You didn't record it, but you remember bits and pieces of it. But now this person's going on to glory, and then all the history they had in them left with them. So use those, your ancestors, your older relatives, because they know stuff that's not on paper. Birth records. The state of Mississippi started keeping birth and death records November 1912. So what happened prior to that date, right? So you use your midwives reports. Go back. I'm not ready for it yet. Your midwives reports, newspaper announcements, church records, manuscript records, and your unofficial birth records. So we like midwives. A lot of times, and I know in my family, that a lot of us were brought up with the word using a midwife. And those records were supposed to be turned over to the Department of Health at a certain time period. That has been midwives though since we've been to this world, right? It's always not always been something they had to report. There's always been a midwife to help with labor. Newspaper announcements. A lot of times when someone has a child, it's going to be announced in the paper. You don't see that in the early records for African Americans, but sometimes if they were prominent, then you will see in the newspaper that Miss Sally Jones and her husband announced a new baby girl. Okay, so this is prior to birth records, and sometimes you can use it after birth records because sometimes children will pass away before they're named or before any record is created for them. Yes, sir.
So for a midwife and say the 1880 state census, if I'm online, are you clicking through or is there a digital index or something so you don't have to go page by page?
For the midwife record?
So you get midwife and let's say the 1880
Okay, so the
state.
midwife records are not online.
Okay.
The elder children records and the state census records, they are.
And do you got to click each image or is there a...
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Church records. Most times in churches, they're going to write in the church record that a new birth, about a new birth. Now what happens with those church records sometimes is another story. Because sometimes, and I found that church secretaries keep the record to themselves. If they're the secretary, those records belong to them. And actually, in my humble opinion, they belong to the church. But a lot of times, secretaries change out, they keep the records for themselves. So sometimes you just have to go back and try to find out who was the secretary, and then see if any of those family members have those records. Because they're not state records, so there's nothing the state can do about it. Manuscript records. Manuscript records are your unpublished family papers. So in your unpublished family papers, you may have all types of records in there. And it may mention how many children were born, and their ages, and who their parents were. And unofficial birth records. Some counties kept birth records, but they were not official because they were not sanctioned by the state. And every county is going to be different. I know we have some in Jackson County, but I don't know if we have any in other county. But as we go through, we find more and more items. I can't forget this lady's name, but she was a midwife. And like I said, unfortunately, a lot of those records were lost. Death records. We have death certificates here, just like the birth records. Mississippi started keeping death records November 1912. Prior to that date, how do you find them? And a lot of times, even after 1912, people didn't realize that you had to report birth and death. Because traditionally, they didn't have to, right? So a lot of times, you have someone who passed away, and the family would take the appropriate mourning time. The people come by and see the person, view the person, and then they will bury them. And they didn't know that they had to report this to the Department of Health. So you have some unofficial death records. Like I said, every county will be different. Cemetery records. I use a lot of cemetery records, but you have to be careful using cemetery records because a lot of times cemetery tombstones are put up years after a person has passed. So a lot of times they didn't have an official piece of paper that said Miss Jones died on March the 3rd, 1922. They recall when it happened. As I recollect, it was a cold, so it had to be in the fall or the winter. And they associate it with an event. Especially if you have a new tombstone and the person has been dead over 100 years, and you have a shiny tombstone, you should question that date. Okay? Funeral home records. Funeral homes have to be registered in the state. Okay? However, the funeral home records themselves are private records. They're not kept by the state. They're not mandated by the state. So if you go to a funeral home, they have to go certain guidelines because they have to be registered to the state. But those records themselves belong to the funeral home. And sometimes, some funeral homes will let you look at their records, and some won't. There's no law that I know that says they have to. Okay? And a lot of times, a lot of these funeral home records are burned once they have so many books and books gathered up. They just throw them out. They don't know that there are so many people out here who want those records. Section reports. So, some counties have section reports. And they list when the person died, when they were going, who the parents were. The ones I can think of right now would be in Natchez. And in the archives here, you can go to the Natchez section reports for a certain time period, and it will give you all that information. And this is prior to the state having death records. Obituaries. Obituaries are personal records. No one has to prove anything on an obituary. Because I may put down this brother, this sister, and you may put down this brother, this sister, and everyone feels differently. It's a good guide, but a lot of times they're not factual to the 100%. It all depends on who's doing the obituary. I know when my aunt died, her granddaughter wrote out the obituaries. And she did not list any of my aunt's sisters and brothers. Only her children and the grandchildren. And I said, where's mama's name? Then everyone started looking like, wait a minute, there are none of the sisters and brothers listed. So that's what they're personal records. They're great records to use. I keep all of mine. I don't give them out. Because if you give out a record, you won't get it back. Let's take a picture of it. You take a picture of it, email it to them. But for your original, you keep that yourself. I've learned the hard way. Okay, newspapers, you can find obituaries in newspapers. Now, in the early parts, in the 1900s, you don't send out African Americans in newspapers unless they were prominent. Or they were in some family that, say you worked for a family and this family was well known, and they thought highly of you, so they may put your obituary, may mention you in the paper. And sometimes maybe just in a small section in the newspaper under colored notices, where you will see just a few things like Sally Jones passed away. John Robinson moved to Chicago. But you won't know to actually go to the newspaper and look for it yourself. Okay. Hospital records and prison records. Hospital records, there are some here. And when I first started working with archival history, we didn't know about these HIPAA laws. And now that we know, things are more of a lockdown or something, right? Because we used to go to the Whitfield records, the Madison Hospital records, all these records, and look at this and tell us when this person was in the hospital, did they die in the hospital, did they recover, and all this. Okay, so the index may be public, but the actual records themselves are not anymore. But there's still access to them. You just have to talk to the curator and let her walk you through how you get access to them. Okay. And prison records. A lot of times prison records, you can find people who passed away in the prison records. And then if you look for the person on the census record, I can't find them. But you remember someone saying that, you know, he was in prison. So you're going to go to the prison records. And actually some of the federal census records have institutional records. And you can, so prison records sometimes are those institution records. And you can go and find your relative there as well. I would like to show the cemetery because it looks so neat and clean. This is not the norm. So I would like to remind people to beware when you go out to a cemetery. First of all, let's make sure that you have the right to be in the cemetery. You don't want to be trespassing. Okay? Because some cemeteries are on private property. And just because you see the cemetery in your county, you can't just jump out and say, I'm going to this and look at that cemetery right there because I know my relatives over there. It's on private property. You need to get permission to be on their property. And some have city cemeteries and a lot of church cemeteries. Which a lot of times the church cemeteries, if they're not fenced in, most times they don't care about you walking the cemetery. But I always ask for permission first. It's better safe than sorry. So I always get, depending on what time of year it is, dress appropriately with your snake bite boots on and all this stuff. And your spray bottle with your alcohol or sulfur or something in it, just, you know, to scare away the snakes. I don't like snakes, y'all. I mean, the first one to leave. I said, wait, Joel, she's in the truck. She saw a snake. So death records. The archives has death records here from November 1912 to 1943. The index is online, is on Ancestry. It would give you your person's name and their death certificate number and their year. You would have to write to the archive to get an actual copy of it. Now, if you choose to write to the State Board of Health at the top of it, you're going to pay 5 times their amount. Just because they go send them. They used to send you a certified copy. Now, I understand that if you want just do a genealogy, they may just send you a Xerox copy. So you pay $15 for something you could have got for 50 cents. At least you just have money to burn. These obituaries. This here is Miss Laura Cadazy Cooley. She was my great-grandmother. Over here is Neighborly Connor. She is my grandmother. This is my grandmother. Laura is Mary Lee's mother. I couldn't find her for the longest time. And why I couldn't find her? Because she was in the hospital at Woodfield. And for years she was there. She was in the hospital at Woodfield when she had 3 small children. And so her husband married someone else, lived with someone else, and that person had children. And said, so you have a household full of young children, young girls. So my grandmother, Mary Lee Connor, she was Mary Lee Gunn, Cooley, Glasgow, and everything else. But my grandmother, Mary Lee, she got married when she was 11.
Okay.
And it's kind of shocking, but historically, it's not shocking.
You know?
You know? Right. So my grandfather, they had a lot of children in the household. So my grandfather came along, he wanted to marry my grandmother. They said, sure. Even though my grandfather was 26. And he had been married before. He thought he was divorced. His wife thought he divorced her, and it was the other way around. And years later, when my grandmother got ready to remarry, changing that to Connor, she found out they would never get married because he had never got divorced.
Oh, wow. Going back to the hospital records, you said that if we wanted to get the full records, we have to speak to a curator. What does that, like, do we just call here?
Now, what you would do, you would go online, find what you want to get. And then you will contact the record librarian, and you will call 601-576-6876.
Okay.
and the librarian will pick it up. And you tell them what you need, and they will guide you from that point.
Okay.
Okay? So my grandmother, Ava Lee, had 16 children. My mom was her first child. She was born when my grandmother was 15. So now I'm talking about the Quilly earlier, and my daughter asked me why did I make up that name for her. Her name was Quilly Candace. So she's named after two great grandparents. Marriage records. How did I find marriage records? And so many times we're like, I'm going to find the marriage record, I'm going to find who their parents were, because on the marriage record. No, it's on your marriage record. Prior to the early 20s, it was not on that. That record, that question wasn't asked. It was bride, the groom, and who the minister was. So if you look at the early marriage records, you look at the parents' names, they're not listed. As years go along, the records get more and more detailed. County, so marriage records are found in the county. They also found in the state. At Vital Records, which is a state agency, you find marriage records. At a certain time period, I think it's 1938. Prior to that, and even now, you go to the county, and so I want to look at the marriage records, and it will tell you what date. Before going to the courthouse, save yourself some steps. Contact the Department of Archives History or go on their website. Choose your county, and it's going to tell you what marriage records they have here. And you can actually come here or write a letter to the archives, because they will do an hour of research for you without a fee. Okay? It will answer questions. It will not do your lineage for you. It will answer questions for you. And then if they locate something, it will send you a quote sheet back saying, I found this record, it's going to cost maybe $250 to get a copy of it. Okay? And when you look at the county records, it may say marriage records, but if you keep scrolling down, it'll say white marriage records, black marriage records, freedmen records. So you need to look at how many different types of marriage records they have. It may say, and it may even say colored records. So every county can be different. But just because you see marriage records, look at all the different, and look at the date range on those records, okay? As I said, don't skip over anything. Vital records, so I just talked about it, Department of Health, newspapers. Sometimes the newspaper you can announce marriage records, announcement in the newspapers. The Freedmen's Bureau of Marriage Records, they're online, and you can search those on the archive website, or you can go to type in the Bureau of Land Management marriage records, and it will let you. It has a search in there as well. Well, sometimes you're not going to find them in the county records, but you may find them in the Freedmen's Bureau records, because someone may have been technically married to each other. Say, I was an enslaved person, and I was given permission to get married. Then once I was emancipated, I made one of my record recorded. And so I went to the Bureau of Land Management, and I had my record recorded. Okay? And church records. Churches keep copies of those records as well. And again, it all depends on the church and what their guidelines are, what the secretary keeps and what says the church. So this is the Maddie Hersey Hospital in Lauderdale, in Meridian. In a perfect words, you can see these words. But it tells when the person came into the hospital, what they coming in for, and under what conditions did they leave. Did they recover, or did they pass away? Those are the same type of records we're going to get from the records from the state hospital at Whitfield. It will tell you this person recovered, or they passed away, or they still there during the time that their record was taken. So these are more penitentiary records. They go by date. And I'm just bringing this record because sometimes, as genealogy, we kind of shy away from certain records. As a genealogy, I tell you, there's no record to shy away from. If that's a piece of paper, I want to see it. Because I don't know what my ancestors were doing. I used to do that. So we talk about probate records here. So how do you locate enslaved persons? Enslaved personal property. That's a one-year thing in life. So when you die, you want their property to be distributed according to your wishes. So you write a will, or the state will decide for you. Okay? So remember, an enslaved person is property. So this is a census of slavery, and shows that the pink dots here where the greatest concentration was for this time period. And you see Mississippi up here, we see the territory. This is one of my favorite maps because we talk about the Emancipation Proclamation. Oh, the Emancipation Proclamation freed all the enslaved people. That's not quite true. It only freed those who were in the states that seceded from the Union. So if you were a slaveholding state and you did not secede from the Union, the Emancipation Proclamation did not affect you. Those enslaved people were not free until the 13th Amendment came out. And so this is a list here. You see Mississippi was the second state to succeed from the Union. All these dates right here. These are counted in pink. These are the succeeding states. Okay? And in the blue, or a lot of whatever that is, periwinkle, these are the free states. But don't forget now, prior to the early 1800s, these states up here did hold enslaved people. Okay? Now, then you have your states over here, territories open to slavery. You have Kansas, Utah, and all these. You've got the Indian territory here. So when you start looking for your ancestors, be sure you look in the right area. This is the Prospect Hill plantation owned by Isaac Ross. And I use this a lot because Isaac Ross, he owned a lot of enslaved people. So when he passed away, in his will, he wanted his enslaved people to go back to Liberia. So there was a huge fight inside the family because enslaved people were property. And property equals money, right? So why are you going to send these people back when I want that money for myself? So there was a huge fight within the family. So whenever you look for this, look up Isaac Ross. And there's a whole story to be told there. This is 1830 federal census. And the only reason I have this listed here, because here's Isaac Ross down here. And in 1830, they didn't use your name everybody in the household, just only hit the household linguistic. So they use what they call the slash system. Okay? Because of all the different headings up here. So if we see Isaac Ross here, and that here is there, one person household, you don't see any other slashes, right? But then you go over here, all these right here, those is enslaved people. So he had lots of enslaved people on his domain. So breaking it out even further. Here, it shows you how many enslaved people he had and found out into what gender they were and their age ranges. It was in Jefferson County. I also note that he was from North Carolina. The State Department of Archives History does have some North Carolina and South Carolina real records here. Majority of them are in book form, but there are some here. This is what I want to get to. So during the lawsuit, all the property has to be inventoried. So if you see here, is that focus right on the stuff? I can't see this. You should see what's focus. Yeah, it was not gonna come in.
Yeah, down front of the projector.
What's going on?
Focus.
Okay, I guess we don't have to do that. I just wanted to show you on that slide that each person has a price next to them. There we go. So each person, he has so many.
You can probably load it down. Yeah.
He has so many enslaved people that he had to put them in different lots. So each one of these people, they have their age and the monetary amount associated with them. So I can see right here, this like Riley, he is 6, he is worth $300. Because he's a young male. And young males cost a lot. Okay. And as you keep going over, you'll just see all the different women, and you'll see a pattern developing here. That the older they are, the less valuable they are. And that men are more valuable than women. So not only did they inventory all this enslaved people, they also inventory this property. So that it said what is that? 198 heads of hogs for $3,000 something. So it's just amazing what's in a wheelbarrow. When they count the number of spoons and knives and dogs and everything else you have, that's all property. So this is, you also find in some records you have a bill of sale for an enslaved person. But you have to keep going through it. And just sometimes I do a wild card on the catalog and I just put it slave. Then see what kind of records come up. Because sometimes you think it's gonna be that type of record. You put it in there, you start clicking through like, oh, so this is a bill of sale for a slave.
Are you doing that by, like a particular county? Are you starting with a county and then typing in slave? Or like, how do you get to the point where you're figuring out who potentially owns your organization?
I used to go by the surname.
Okay.
Right. So my surname is Lawson. And because I'm not going to use Lawson because that's my first name. I want to use my surname, my maiden name, which is Coleman. And I go to the county that I know my Coleman family is from. They're from Clay and Lowndes County. So I go to the records in Clay County. I'm sorry, not Clay County, Lowndes County, because Clay County was formed after the Civil War. I go to Lowndes County because that's the parent county. Then I look at the slave owner with my surname. Then I start searching those and see if any of those names match up to any of my ancestors for the time period. So I know my surname is Coleman, Chandler, and Coles. So I would go to use those names and try to backtrack my family. And I did find backtrack some of them to the Freedmen's Bureau. They were on the Freedmen's Bureau. And then another whole set of family in Alabama that crossed over the land. Because family had already said that Coleman is not the original name. I never knew that in. But family stories said that's not the original name. And so when I couldn't find them on the 1880 census, I found 1880, but I couldn't find 1870. Because 1880, when they crossed over, they changed their name to a different surname. And the only way I was able to find them because they had a unique first name. His name was Shadrach. And so I looked at all the names: Shadrach, Shad, Shed. Any nickname I could think of, and use the wild card, and I use one family member. And sure enough, I found an entire set of family members in Lowndes County, but they had come from Alabama. They changed their name. Just a surname though. So a lot of times you'll see people change their name. And if you can't find a family member, and it's in a certain time period, try using a wild card, just using their first name. It's like, okay, I look for my father, and I was like, John. And then I put some of his children in there. Then I put African American, Clay County. Then those that pop up now to see any of those match the time period or the age ranges of the one I'm looking for.
And is this on like an ancestry as an example?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can also do the same thing with before we had ancestry, we had all the books and the sound decks. You can do the same thing that way. You will search by county.
And at the beginning, how far did you say these records go back?
Every county is different. So there's not a set time here.
Okay.
So, for example, Adams County, first county formed in 1798. Okay. Humphreys County, last county formed in 1918. So you just have to go check your county and then check the history of that county and see how far that county goes back.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
then you have vendors who sell slaves, the emancipating of an enslaved person. There's a whole legal argument on how you can emancipate a slave. You can't just say, oh, on my death, everybody knows I'm on free, right? It has to be in paperwork, it has to be a following guidelines according to the law, or the family could challenge it. One of my favorite types of records is the WPA records, the Works Progress Administration, because they interviewed a lot of former slaves, and they talked about who their master was, and how many children they had, and where they lived, and their treatment. And those records are here, but it's also a federal record, and they're also at the Library of Congress. You can look them up by county. These are the slave names I was talking about. So there's a book written, indexed by Raywick. The last name is Raywick. And in it, you just go to the Mississippi section, because the section out by state. Go to the Mississippi section, then look for the names there. So this is like a transcribe what goes on in that transcript. These are the Freedom Bureau's records, and you can search those online. There are marriage records, contracts, land records. And there's a lot of records written to the commissioners because they'll say they're not being treated right, especially on some of these contracts. Because this section was set up so that the former enslavers could not re-enslave the person. So they had to show they would get, this free person was getting some kind of compensation. They will be educated, or way up in and they're going to be paid. So a lot of times this didn't happen, so the free person had the right to the Bureau of Land Management and say, this is what happened, and there's a whole series of how the state responds, the federal government responds back to it. So he was like, this is like one page, you can just search the page, put in your surname, like I said in there, I think that's told me. And then I did down the code, when the code, and it told me what county they were in, and then told me what contract I should look for. Now these records are online, so just go to the Freedom Bureau contract. When you go to the Archives website, you go to the search page, and you go down to it says links. You're going to see Freedom Bureau records. freedom of marriage contracts. All those records on the bottom, and if it's listed in blue, click on the blue and it's gonna take you to another site. And if you get lost in somewhere along the line, call the archive at that number I just gave you. That goes directly to the archive's help desk. Okay? So we have records from some manifest records, income and outgoing. These records now are indexed online for the New Orleans records. And for example, this is one I found concerning Mississippi. And you said it's James Hanna from Mississippi. And he's listed the people he's bringing ownership with him. It gives it their name, their sex, their age, and their height, and their complexion. So, coming up soon, because we didn't talk about how to use the dog's rolls. Because so many of us have Native American ancestors. And we've been trying to find those ancestors. We've heard the dog's rolls, we've heard the Armstrong rolls, we've heard all the Cherokee records, but how do you get to those records? So next time in June, on the 14th of June, we're going to talk about the introduction to the dog's rolls. How to use those records. Because a lot of African Americans lived on some of the reservations. Sometimes these people were not just living there, they were enslaved on the reservation. So a lot of Native Americans did hold slaves as well. Okay? Then after this, so the dog's rolls was, it's like it was done in segments. So like in 1898, and then I think the last one was done in 1906. So you have to sign up to go to Oklahoma. So a lot of African Americans signed up to go, but they had to prove they were somehow related to the tribe they were with. Okay? So you just didn't go because when you're going there, you're going to get an allotment of land. Now, what happened once they got to Oklahoma, that's a entirely different story. We're going to talk about it sometime in the future. Because now we have here in Oklahoma, and you have a lot of Native Americans saying, why are you giving them names? Because they're not Native Americans, they're black. Or they're white. They shouldn't be getting names, that name belongs to us. So that's an entirely different story. You know, history goes on and on. There's no ending to it. So that's our next section, is June 14th. And here, it's going to be in this room. Hope see all of you are here. Bring your friend, pack a friend. Be ready to talk about those Native American ancestors. Because we're going to talk about just the 5 civilized tribes. We'll talk about Choctaws, Cherokee, Chickasaw, Seminole, and there's another, Creek. Okay. And we're going to dispel some of those rumors that we heard about how we related to Native Americans. That my ancestor was a Native American princess. All those things that have been debunked over